Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome again to our program. We're delighted today to welcome to the Lipscomb campus and to our city of Nashville, Donald Tong. Donald is the Hong Kong Commissioner for Economic and Trade Affairs of the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region Government. What a big title. You must have a large business card.
Yeah.
Well, welcome to Lipscomb, Donald.
Thanks, Dean.
Now, Commissioner Tong, tell us what a commissioner does. What is your role in the Hong Kong government here in the United States?
Well, our most important role is to foster closer economic, trade, and cultural ties between the U.S. and Hong Kong. And for that reason, I travel across the U.S. a lot, and we also have an office by the name of IMES Hong Kong, which specializes in assisting U.S. companies to expand or to set up offices in Hong Kong. And I'm very glad to say that we have lots of U.S. companies in Hong Kong.
I know you do. I'm sure you do. And we'll talk about that in just a moment. So as I understand it, Commissioner Tong, the title of commissioner would be equivalent to the title of ambassador if Hong Kong had the type of government where you would have embassies around the world, but you don't because you're a part of China. So you might talk to us for just a moment about the transition from British oversight to Chinese oversight. How does that working out for Hong Kong? And frankly, how does that work?
Yeah, indeed, the transition has gone very well, much better than what many people expect. And you are absolutely right. As the commissioner, I am the top person of the Hong Kong Special Administrative Government in the U.S. And you're also right that because we are not a sovereign power, so obviously a title like Ambassador Consul General would not work for us. That's the reason why we call my title is called the Hong Kong Commissioner. Hong Kong has been operating under the one country, two systems principle since July 1st of 1997. And I actually worked in the same office before 1997 when the Hong Kong Economic and Trade Office was part of the British Embassy. But in these days, the Hong Kong Economic and Trade Office had a separate and independent status. My office does not report to Chinese diplomats out here. Our bosses are all in Hong Kong, and I work with a high degree of autonomy, independent of the Chinese diplomatic missions in the U.S.
Now, Hong Kong is one of the major cities of the world. It's one of the most important trade ports in the world. In fact, when we take students each spring, which we're about to do in just a few days, we're always fascinated to see the busy harbor in Hong Kong. We go to the shipping terminal and we see the thousands of containers that are on their way back to the Western world with goods and services from China. Tell us a little bit about the role of Hong Kong as it relates to the larger economy of China. What are the principal products of Hong Kong, and what are the largest services and companies located in Hong Kong?
Yeah. Hong Kong is, as you rightly point out, a major international financial and logistic and trading hub. The key services in Hong Kong, there are largely four key economic pillars, we call it. They are namely in tourism, financial services, trading and logistics, and also in professional services like accounting, legal services, and whatnot. And Hong Kong is now we have the third busiest container port in the world. So you are right. We are seeing lots of container ships leaving Hong Kong, and the sort of products that they contained either head towards China from overseas economies like the US, Europe, and at times they also carry products, of course, from the mainland of China to its trading partners around the world, including, of course, the US. Hong Kong and the mainland of China has very strong economic links, of course, which have been further strengthened after 1997. But some of our friends might not know that China is the biggest investor in Hong Kong. Indeed, if you look at our stock market, Chinese companies account for around 50%, 50 to 60% of the total market capitalization of our stock market. And separately, Hong Kong is also the single largest external investor in the mainland of China. Hong Kong business community has own around 40% of the total external investment in the mainland of China. So that, I think, is a good reflection of the close working relationship between the two economies.
And I think many Americans, Commissioner Tong, before they go to China for the first time, think of China as an emerging country. And perhaps it is true that certain parts of China are very rural and perhaps are emerging, but the large cities in China are just fabulous.
Yes.
The largest cities in the world are located in China. Hong Kong, of course, would be one of the most sophisticated cities in the world. In fact, I was flabbergasted on my first visit to Hong Kong to see that I could check my bags downtown in an office building. I could board an efficient train, go straight to the airport, never have to check my bags again. In fact, I wouldn't see my bags again until I arrived back here in Nashville.
Indeed.
So talk about the infrastructure of not only Hong Kong but China. You are rapidly surpassing America in terms of your sophistication. Why is that?
I think we've been very lucky. Of course, one key reason is our particular link with the mainland of China, particularly in economic terms. And because China is a developing economy, an economy that has been growing at around anywhere 9 to 10% a year in the past decade or so, Hong Kong as the immediate neighbor of the mainland of China, therefore stands to benefit a lot. And indeed, of course, we also have lots of mainland companies who now come to Hong Kong, using Hong Kong as a springboard to reach out to the international arena. So that helps to our economy to grow significantly. And of course, I should also add that we are never complacent. We do not take things for granted. I think in these days of a global village, if you are not working hard, the chances that you will be lagging behind. And so in addition to counting on the four key economic pillars like tourism and financial services, which I mentioned earlier on, we have been working very hard to develop new industries, identify new areas whereby we have some edge over some other players, and then create an environment conducive to its development. And one of the, perhaps I can cite an example, and I certainly welcome Lipscomb University to come and enjoy the duty-free wine in Hong Kong. We used to have a very high duty on wine, as much as 80%, but then we removed the wine duty in 2008. And since then, the Hong Kong wine business has flourished. And now, where are we? Hong Kong is now the largest auction center for fine wine. We are also the third largest market for U.S. wine. In terms of the import value of wine, it has gone up from 200 to 300 million in 2007, 2008 to last year around 900 million. It has created lots of jobs, lots of new business, and we have also got lots of new companies from overseas, wine auction houses, wine storage facilities, Somalia, that trading companies that have come to Hong Kong to develop this wine business. So that is an illustration of how we continue to come up with new ideas.
I think closely related to my fascination with the sophistication of your infrastructure is my observation that the sophistication of your consumer brands and retail stores is not surpassed really anywhere else in the world. It's fascinating for me to go to China and specifically to Hong Kong and see every major luxury brand in the world represented in Hong Kong. We sometimes think of China as a country that is that contains many hundreds of millions of very low-wage workers. But the reality is there's a very large and growing middle class,
Yes.
upper middle class
Yes.
in China. Do you see that continuing, and how will that play out in the future?
That would be extremely important. Important not just for Hong Kong, but also for perhaps China's overseas trading partners. You are absolutely right that indeed in Hong Kong, last year we have 36 million visitors from all around the world, and more than 20 million of them are from the mainland of China. And Americans used to be the #1 spender in Hong Kong, but no longer. The Chinese are #1 spender in these days. They come to Hong Kong to buy brand name products, taking advantage of the absence of sales tax in Hong Kong, of course, and because we also take counterfeit products seriously in Hong Kong. So I think for those shoppers in Hong Kong, they do not have to worry about spending money on counterfeit products. They know that what they pay for is what they get. And together with the absence of sales tax, that makes Hong Kong truly a sort of shopping paradise for many. But going back to the question of the expansion of the middle class, this is extremely important. And we also believe that as the Chinese economy continue to grow, its middle class will continue to expand. And you can look at, say, take for example, the number of automobiles sold in the mainland of China as a good reference point. And you can see that in many aspects. I think the middle class people in the mainland of China can afford to buy also luxurious products. And of course, with the further expansion of the middle class, we do see that it would be a bigger market for consumer products coming from Hong Kong and perhaps from the US. And for Hong Kong, of course, we also benefit from additional number of visitors from the mainland. We certainly welcome them with open arms.
I think another aspect of visiting China is the overwhelming scale and size of everything. In addition to being a huge country geographically, China is also a huge country from a population standpoint. I believe there are 1,400,000,000 people who live in China, the largest country in the world in terms of population. But what's fascinating to me is that your one child per family policy has now resulted in a declining birth rate, and you're actually aging. In fact, you're aging at a rate almost as fast as the US is aging, and India will eventually overtake you in terms of population growth, because India is growing younger and younger, where China is beginning to get older. Do you see the one child per family policy changing in China? And if so, will that reverse the trend and China will begin to grow in population again?
It is somewhat difficult for me to comment on China's population control policy, rather than to say that I think China has a broad base to start with, and so it is some issue that they have to look at carefully. As far as Hong Kong is concerned, of course, we do not have any population control measures. It will be up to, just like in the US, Hong Kong government leaves it entirely up to Hong Kong citizens to have many children as they like. And indeed, in Hong Kong, we do encourage young couples, well, indeed, not just young couples, to give birth to more children. For Hong Kong, people are our asset, and we certainly hope that we'll continue to have a healthy growth in terms of our population. I think China is a developing economy with 1.3 billion people, 1.4 billion people. I'm pretty sure that they would have the necessary workforce to make sure that it will continue to grow very robustly, and Hong Kong will be more than happy to play a constructive role in that.
Well, I'm sure you will. Commissioner, there was an interesting article in this morning's New York Times, which says inflation in China poses big threat to global trade. The article goes on to point out that the growth rate of the Chinese economy is now at an annualized rate of almost 10% a year. In fact, it has been at that rate for several years now, and that has resulted in the Chinese economy becoming the second largest economy in the world. Eventually, you will overtake the United States as the world's largest economy. Is China our friend or our foe?
From the U.S. point of view?
Yes, from the U.S. point of view.
I certainly believe that it should be a friendly relationship. And we also see that the Chinese government and the U.S. government have been working very hard to make sure that they understand each other and that they have a constructive, comprehensive, a positive relationship. Chinese President Hu Jintao just paid a visit, a very successful one, to Washington, D.C. and also to Chicago. And I think later on, of course, lots of U.S. ministers and also President Biden Vice President Biden, will also be meeting many Chinese leaders. We do believe that as long as both sides continue to engage one another, it would be to the benefit of all. And for Hong Kong in particular, because China is our #1 trading partner. The U.S. is our #2 trading partner, so Hong Kong is certainly has lots of interest at stake if the two does not have a harmonious relationship. But having been an observer of U.S.-China relationship for some decades, we do believe that as long as both continue to talk to one another, to engage one another, I'm pretty sure that differences. And there will be differences. They will be able to address this in an applicable manner. I think like any trading partners, well, the U.S. also have differences with some of your other trading partners, and this is just normal. The most important thing is to concentrate on the common grounds and continue to work on the differences. I'm pretty sure that we'll be able to see a positive development between the U.S. and also China, and we are very hopeful of that.
Well, we certainly trust that that's the case, and we look forward to that, and we are your friend, and we appreciate you being our friend. As we think about this inflation rate issue, many people are talking about a real estate bubble in China.
Yeah.
Many people are very concerned about that. We went through that process in this country a couple of years ago, and it's been very difficult to recover from that. Are you on the verge of a bursting real estate bubble in China? And if so, how could that be prevented?
I think the reality is that because of the strong demand for housing and the rising population, and also a relatively low cost of capital in the U.S., so we do see some sort of hot money going to Asia. Certainly that affects economies like Hong Kong, Singapore. In China, of course, they also see somewhat a boom in the property market, though for a different reason. I think all the governments, most of the governments understand that they want to maintain a healthy growth of the property market. And I think that looking at the U.S. and many other economies, we do understand the bursting of a property market bubble would the sort of damage that it could cause. So I think all the governments have been undertaking measures in the context of their having regard to their local and domestic factors to combat this problem. As far as Hong Kong is concerned, what we have done is we have increased land supply. We have also lowered the loan-to-value ratio. We have also introduced other measures so that people will not be spending an overwhelming portion of their income in paying installment, because otherwise, once the interest rate is on the low side right now, but the interest rate will go up. It's just a matter of timing, and we are worried that if people are spending too much of their money in paying installment, the loan installment for their properties, then the chances that they will be in big trouble when the interest rate goes up again. So that is something that we've been working with the banking community, and I think so far it has been achieving good results. And as far as China is concerned, obviously, because its economy it's not a market economy like Hong Kong, so the Chinese government has adopted some other measures to somewhat more direct measures in dealing with the problem. But I think I should leave it to perhaps the Chinese government to comment on the effectiveness of their policies.
You mentioned in passing just a moment ago the savings rate in China.
Yes.
And that's another thing that's fascinating about your country, because I believe you have perhaps the highest rate of savings of any country in the world. The typical Chinese couple saves about half of their income and invest that for the future. And there are perhaps many reasons for that, including the historical, cultural reasons, as well as the need to provide for health care and some things like that. But do you see that rate of savings continuing in the future as it has in the past? Do you see a change in the younger Chinese attitude toward savings, or is that continuing to be a part of the culture as new generations come along?
I haven't seen any report so far, but my personal experience is that younger generation like to spend more. I certainly see that in my girls, that sort of trend. I think in these days, the younger generation, they got more offers from shopping malls and all sorts of new electronic products, and indeed the product cycle is shorter and shorter. I think all the merchandise producers try to attract consumers to buy more often. Don't wait until the lifespan of any particular products. So we are seeing that, and so the chances that I think the saving ratio might change somewhat, but this is something that we have to keep a very close eye on. A higher saving ratio obviously would have an impact on the economic growth.
Absolutely. As we conclude our interview, I'm fascinated by the history of China. When we first visited China a couple of years ago with our students, and as I began to refresh my memory of what I had learned about China as a student, and then I learned more as we've gone back each year since then, China is a country that has been great for a long, long time. In fact, at one point it had the largest economy in the world.
Yes.
Several hundred years ago. China has an enormous culture and history. China is actually just reasserting its place in the scheme of world history. And so I wonder what observations you would make, what advice you would give us as Americans as you think about your position as Chinese, and as you talk to us as Americans, what advice would you give us as a country? What do you see in our country that you would change, or that you wish we perhaps could learn from you more about?
Dare not to give advice to Americans, but the only thing I can say that is looking at, and we do not take success for granted, looking at the developments in Hong Kong, I think there are perhaps several lessons that perhaps we could share with Americans. Whether it works or not in the U.S., I think I'm not in a position to really comment on that. I think the couple of factors, including number one, I think it is important for the government to spend money in education. I think people can either be an asset or a liability, depending on the sort of education they have. The higher the education level, the greater the possibility that they will be turned into an asset rather than a liability. And the Hong Kong government has been spending at least almost a quarter of our government budget on education. I think the second thing is we have to look at the economic structure. In Hong Kong's case, we used to be a light manufacturing center, but we have lost that some 30, 40 years ago because our manufacturers start shifting their manufacturing base to the mainland of China because of the lower costs, the lower labor costs out there. Of course, the Hong Kong government could try to stop it and to ring fence it and to continue to maintain a manufacturing industry in Hong Kong. We haven't done that because we believe that there is no way that we could do that even if we want to. In any event, Hong Kong is a market economy. We cannot stop our manufacturers from investing elsewhere in the mainland of China or otherwise. So what the Hong Kong government has done is we let go. But at the same time, we provide retraining to some of the workers in the light manufacturing industry so that they could continue to make a livelihood. We also invest a lot in education so that the next generation, the children of these workers, know that there is a way, another way to make a living, to make a decent living. And I think Hong Kong, eventually, if you look at our economic structure, 92% of our GDP now comes from services. If we continue to hold on to the manufacturing industry, we would not have grown to where we are now. And I think another, the third factor may be the role of the government. Hong Kong government is a strong believer of laissez-faire, market economy. We believe that the role of the government is to create is to be a facilitator, to let the market do whatever it likes instead of picking winners. Even though we have identified certain industry, we believe that they would have strong potentials in Hong Kong, but we do not offer subsidy. We do not dictate anyone to go into this line of business. We just create the environment. And as in the example which I quote earlier, like wine, we just remove the duty on wine and then just let the market take the lead. And eventually, not eventually, we haven't reached the final step yet. It has been growing very successfully and healthily so far. So these are the sort of experience that we have learned from the Hong Kong experience. We certainly hope to see stabilization of the U.S. economy. As I pointed out before, the U.S. is a very important trading partner for Hong Kong, and if the U.S. economy doesn't come back, we will certainly stand to lose as well. And we look forward to working closely with the U.S. on this front.
Well, Commissioner Tong, it's been a pleasure for us to have you here today at Lipscomb and to be in our city of Nashville. I must say that it's a thrill to see the Eiffel Tower in Paris and the Taj Mahal in India, but I believe the greatest thrill I've ever had is to watch the laser light show at 8 o'clock every night against the harbor there in Hong Kong. And you certainly come from perhaps the most beautiful city in the world. So again, welcome to our campus and welcome to Nashville.
Thank you, and we look forward to welcome you and your students in Hong Kong.
And we'll look forward to that too. Our guest today has been Commissioner Donald Tong from Hong Kong. We're thrilled to have him, and we thank you for joining us today.